Rogaway here, and we're back with another tutorial, and we are continuing on with our Super Mario video game. And up to this point, we have created a moving character, we've got a simple collision detection test that we did, and now we've created an object called hit zones that is basically going to be the object that Mario will come in contact with throughout the game. And if I scroll through this, you can see that every block has been covered with the red blocks, and it's a movie clip symbol. Let me just say one thing. This is not the right way to do it. This is because we're working over an image. What I would normally do is create symbols for the blocks, actually draw them and place them into the level. Okay, rather than just putting blocks over an existing background like what we're doing here. But for the sake of the tutorial, this is going to work. So, now that we have this as a movie clip, we're going to give it an instance name, and I'm going to call it Platforms. Okay, that's the name I like, Platforms. And we're going to go into our code, and we're going to go into our actions, and we're going to tell it to do something with platforms. Now, let's not mess up here. You'll notice now we still have the old collision detect. We can still use that. But hit test object is no longer. We've deleted it. So now what we're going to be doing is hit testing for platforms. Okay, we don't have a second frame, but we're going to be checking to see if platforms hits or collides with Mario. Now I want to say one thing about using hit test point like we've got here. We need to say X and Mario Y. When it's true, what happens? Okay, when there's a detection, a hit detected, sorry. So in a game where we have these objects that he can collide with, we know that the background and the hit test objects are scrolling at the same speed as his walk. Well, in order for it to look like we hit something, we need to subtract from these values. Okay, if when we move, they're increasing, then when he hits something, they need to subtract. So we're going to take these two objects, world1.x walk speed and hittest.x walk speed. Oh, and hit test doesn't exist anymore. This is now called platforms. Sorry. We're going to take these two, we're going to copy them, paste them into here because, whoops, these are the things that are going to be affected by us colliding with the platforms. So in this case, we're going to subtract like that. And now we're telling it that when he collides with a platform, subtract the walk speed. So basically move him back, whatever the walk speed was, so he doesn't hit it anymore. So let's test that. Here we go, we're walking, and when we hit this block, we get stuck inside of it. That's because the walk speed amount isn't enough for us to jump back far enough. We know that the walk speed was set to 10, but it's not enough to drive our character back far enough to have him leave the block. So let's do, let's say 15 instead. Go a couple extra pixels, go 15 and test that. And watch what happens. We fly through it. Do you see the problem? We need to put negative 15. We want to drive him back. Let's test that again. And now we get this bounce effect. He can't pass that block. Okay, so what's happening here? We have told it that when he comes into contact with that block, we need to push him back 15 pixels back on the world, which is the background, and on the platforms, which are the hit test objects. Okay, so that's working great. But now let's say he has to jump up to these other objects, and they have to have hit tests on them as well. Well, we're going to do two things in one here. First of all, we're going to create our jump sequence, and we're also going to create something called gravity. So go back up to the top of your coding of your script here, and let's add a variable called gravity. Oh, yes, gravity, sorry. And it's going to be an integer, and its value is going to be set to 1. Let's also create a variable called jumped, which is a Boolean. Remember, Booleans can be true or false, and right now it's false. And the last, oh yeah, no, we'll stop with that. So we've got two new variables to play with. We got gravity and jumped. And now we also want to add a detector on our keyboard down function for a space bar being hit. So I'm going to type this manually. If, you could copy and paste if you want, but if key code equals, oops, keyboard space, then I want you to run another sequence here. Now this is going to be a new one for you guys, one that you haven't seen before. So if exclamation mark jumped, okay, and what this is saying is if we are not already jumping, okay, this is a not, it's called a not operand here, okay, a not, if we are not already jumping, then do this, okay? We're going to set our y-axis to 17, sorry, minus 17. This is how high he's going to jump. And within here, we're going to tell it that jumped now equals true. Okay, remember it was false up here. When we hit space, it now becomes true. All right, so if we're not already jumping, our y-axis changes 17 and our jumped becomes true. Now this might be a little tricky to understand, but we're gonna add some more further down because right now it's not doing much. We also want it to detect if Mario is touching the ground as well. So that requires us to add another collision detection down below for him touching the ground. And this is where gravity is very important. Okay, so let's go down and let's go to our collision detect. Okay, it's also going to include our jump. So I'll try my best to explain this. It's not easy, but follow along. We are going to set our y-axis to plus or equal to our gravity. And basically, if we want to fall faster, or we want to jump, we want to get pulled down faster, we want to, jump at a faster rate, we just go up and change our gravity number, and this is going to increase by a bigger amount. Okay, right now it's only increasing by 1 because gravity is set to 1. Okay, now this is where it gets tricky. If exclamation mark platforms, okay, so if we're not touching the platforms, hit test, whoops, test point. Oh, I have bad spelling today. Point. Mario X and Mario Y are not, then Mario's y value is greater than, or is added, we're adding the y-axis. Okay? Remember, the y-axis is equal to the gravity, okay, and whatever his current y-axis is, we're adding that on. Okay? Now remember, if he's jumping, his y-axis is going up 17. Okay? If a spaceboard hit is detected, so it's going to change minus 17, he's going to go up. We can change this to whatever, and it's going to make him jump higher. Okay? We're going to add another new command here that you may not have seen before. This is called a for loop. Okay? Now this one's tricky to explain, but this corrects that problem where he gets stuck in the bricks. For variable I equals 0, and if I is less than 10, increase I by 1. What is this saying? This is a really fancy way of saying repeat whatever's in here 10 times. Let's think about this. For variable I is 0 to start. As long as it's less than 10, increase by 1 every time this runs, until it reaches 10, and then it doesn't do it anymore. Okay? Inside here, we're going to put another detection, platforms dot hit, hit test point. If Mario is making contact with platforms. Okay, remember up here it was not, above here it was not. If this is now true, and he is making contact, then we want his y-axis to subtract by 1. We're going to set the y-axis to 0. Oops. Just to reset it. And we're going to tell it now that jumped has gone back to false. Okay, so this is a very tricky piece of code in here. All right, our collision detection now is pretty complicated. We looked at a few new things here. The not operands. So if something is not happening, this is what's going to be applied. Okay? Further down, we will not complete this. It won't turn to false until it's done this 10 times. And here we are setting our y-axis to our gravity. So if everything is set properly and our collision detection's working, we should be able to play this now and press the space bar, and he should jump 17 up and come back down as well. So let's test that. Test. Looks like I got an error somewhere in my code, so I'm going to look for that. Okay, and I found it. I forgot an if statement here. That's all that was missing. I forgot to put if, and that's enough to screw it up. So when I test this, he jumps and he comes back down, and when he hits a block, he stays on top of the block. Okay, it's using the platforms object to detect, and it's allowing me to stay on top of those objects when I come into contact with them. So this is working great. All right, and hopefully it makes sense. I know there was a couple of really tricky things that we did there. As you study the code, it'll make more sense. And as you start to code your own things, it'll work, or you'll start to understand what it's doing. You will notice, however, that he can jump through the blocks, which may not look that great, but we can live with it for now. All right, so hopefully that makes sense to you. Everything should be working correctly up to this point. Next, we'll look at how to remove those blocks or hide those blocks and how to add some pickups to the game.